Welcome to Let's Bloom's panel discussion on generative AI and compliance, a balancing act for startups and enterprises. Um, Today we're going to delve into the challenges and opportunities GenAI presents for businesses of all sizes, with a particular focus on compliance. Um, and before we get into the panel discussion today, let me introduce our esteemed panelists here, starting with Morosoko, who's Transparently.ai founder and CTO. We have Madhukar Makhija, who's from HSBC. He's the Global Head of Data, AI, and Analytics. And we've got Asif Salim from Google Cloud. He's Industry Principal Architect, FSI. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the panelists. And the panel is moderated by yours truly, Neha Rehani. The photo is 14 years younger. Maybe I need GenAI to come up with a new photo of mine, but maybe that's later. So I think I'm going to start with the promise of generative AI. What are the opportunities? What are the use cases that you guys have been solving for? And maybe introduce yourself a little bit, and then talk about the use case so that we know the context. Maybe let me start with you, Moro. What are the use cases that you guys are solving for?
Yes, hi. Hi, I'm Mauro. I am the co-founder and CTO of Transparently.ai. CTO is kind of a big title. Just do a little bit of everything tech. that's exactly what I do. Yeah, I spent my whole life in tech. I work for some of the big techs. I worked for Amazon for 14 years, and I guess interestingly enough, I spent 8 years or 7 years at Google. Was my last job, where I worked for the office of the CTO. So I was representing the Google Cloud CTO in the region, and then I specialize mostly in AI. What we do is basically we try to find who's going to be the next Enron and the next Wirecard, right? So we can tell you 3 years in advance who is the next one. Basically, that's in short. So what we do is we check for accounting quality. We detect accounting manipulation and fraud, and we use AI for that, and we use the same techniques that a forensic accountant would use, same techniques that the short seller would use, except that we automate it and we have the machines do it for us, and they do a better job, much more accurate, and much faster. So that's where we add a lot of value.
Thank you so much. Madhukar, if you want to just talk about the use cases that you're solving at HSBC.
Hi everyone. Sorry. So I head the data AI analytics for security services and markets for HSBC. In fact, I joined HSBC just 5 months back. I was with Standard Chartered for almost 8 years before that. Built that entire data infrastructure from scratch together with Lokesh. We started together there. And I mean, the journey itself was pretty interesting and exciting, starting from entire data management to then leading to the data products, right? And that's where then the power of AI and ML started kicking in. And one of the key things is obviously data comes first, and then the products and the AI really find its use. So yeah, I mean, in terms of Gen AI specifically, and I'll just focus on what we are doing at HSBC. I mean, it's a new technology, and specifically in banks domain, we are heavily regulated both internally and externally, and we have a very large set of organization who is just managing AI compliance, right? So any use case which we have to implement has to go through multiple rounds of compliance checks, guardrails in place, and risk governance is checked based on not only the input of the data which we are using, but also the output of the use case. Right? So if I talk about value, just for the GenAI, there are 3 specific areas we are really trying to find value from GenAI. One, specifically in compliance itself, from perspective of how we can find red flags internally in terms of the policy documentations, and I specifically lead security services space where we have some fund performance SLAs to be enforced, and that's where I mean a lot of manual efforts goes in on a daily basis to ensure that those SLAs are not breached, and then fund managers are working within the compliance framework, and that's where one of the areas we are really exploring GenAI is how we can automate that entire compliance monitoring together with what fund managers are doing in terms of their transactional business and their transactional nature on a daily basis, and raise the right red flags at right time. Second, use of GenAI, we are really exploring, and some of the use cases are already live, bringing the operational efficiency. One of the use cases which went live just last month was around the transactional reconciliations, where on a daily basis our reconciliation system was throwing almost like 28,000 exceptions, and using AutoML and GenAI tool, we were able to bring it down by 80% by looking at the auto matches, like what are the right matches which shouldn't, or basically false positives, right? So identifying the false positive, looking at the pattern, looking at the steps which operational team used to do to then fix those exceptions, and that actually brought in the efficiency save for almost 23 FTEs within the region. And another key use case which we are now looking at is really migrating users to data as service, right? So one of the key thing around managing or data management itself is data is huge, data is humongous, and then it is coming from multiple sources. At this moment, data is cheap, but data quality is expensive, right? So how do I bring that data quality in is where we are also exploring GenAIs to match and come up with those data quality errors early on before we actually adopt any data into any use case. And one of the thing which we, in fact, we did a hackathon and we won recently, where one of our clients were consuming 400 manual reports, right? And we wanted to just get away from it and standardize all those 400 reports into just maybe 20 standard reports and all. And that's where we use large language model to then standardize, consolidate all these different data elements, and on top of that, understanding the metadata and matching that data with our core data sets to come up with a solution that, okay, you don't need 400 reports, here is 50 reports, you have everything at your disposal. And that not only cut cost on our operational effort on a monthly basis to generate those reports, validate those reports, but also then we started offering those 50 reports as a service which clients can use as per their convenience and as per their channel of consumption. So these are few GenAI areas which we are exploring now, but I mean, the application is huge, whether it is like email classification, auto email replies, and in terms of the operational efficiency, also in terms of the, if we talk about the revenue generation as well, we are now exploring how we can create some cross-sell, upsell kind of opportunities using the patterns we are seeing on the data, as well as the discussions with client management teams are having with our clients. So we are using large language model to now learn the different conversations our operational and client management teams are having with their clients, and come back with some of the key themes, or come back with some of the opportunities which then converts into leads for our sales teams. Right? So these are the areas which we really feel can bring back.
Okay, that's like a lot of use cases, from operational efficiency to compliance automation. And the good part was that it's not just on the cost efficiencies, but you did bring in the revenue element also, how you're able to increase your revenue stream with some of the use cases you're solving. I think that's impressive. Asif, coming to you, like what are the use cases you're solving for Google Cloud customers?
Sure. Just a quick intro on my side. Asif Salim. I'm a principal architect for financial services at Google for the APAC region, where basically I'm working with our top FSI customers across the APAC region, helping them transform with Google Cloud AI, GenAI, and other different technology components. One of the reasons I'm also here is basically because of the word SC. I worked with Stan Chartered for almost over 14 years, and that's where I started my first, that was the first enterprise banking company which I worked with. I started my career with Stan Chartered. I used to run digital banking business for them. This was basically from 2001 to 2015, right? So I think probably, we didn't cross paths, but it's great to see that there are two people from Stan Chartered. It's a fantastic organization. And since then, I continue to work with big techs and work with Oracle, IBM, and now with Google Cloud. So going back to the point that you asked specifically around use cases. See, the use cases are evolutionary, and as I say, it's the appetite and the readiness of the customer and the mindset with which basically we are seeing a lot of new use cases emerge. These use cases can be around, all the way from prospecting to customer acquisition, from customer acquisition to deepening, as some of the components that you talked about. We are also seeing use case around customer servicing, fulfillment, operations. We are seeing a lot of use cases around back office. But in a nutshell, Neha, I think it's not about the use cases, right? When I am working with the customers, specifically the big enterprise customers like HSBC or others, what I'm realizing that with AI or with GenAI, as we call it, I think it's a transformative change, just like when internet and mobile banking came in close to about 15 years ago. And that's where when we were launching internet banking, mobile banking solutions, I remember people used to say that these are alternate distribution channels, right? Branch is considered the main channel, internet and mobile are alternate channels. I think the same transformation I expect to happen in the next couple of years with AI and GenAI. It will make internet and mobile obsolete, right? Or it will at least make them alternate distribution channels. So when this transformation is happening, what I realize is that having the right platform is super, super important. And on that platform, you can stitch everything, right? Say it be from prospects to acquisition, you can also stitch all the data components that you talked about, data readiness, how you kind of take it, not only at a data level, but also at an AI level, because I think the lines are really blurred. Poor data results in poor value creation in AI. In fact, what you are talking about, is very, very interesting, right? Because if you do not have data available, you will not be able to do due diligence of all these. So to cut it short, basically more and more use cases will emerge. In fact, I think it's all very evolutionary. It's all on the mental maturity and the readiness and the risk of how enterprise organization and fintechs can go and scale.
Yeah, sure, please.
So that's fascinating what you just say, because I think even naming the use cases is pretty hard, because I recently told my daughter that I feel like when we discovered electricity, there was so much to be invented with it, right? And then suddenly I'm in that space, and I am like, I get crazy about all the things that I could do, and the use cases are almost infinite. Really, everything that we do, you can pretty much apply AI in one way or another. So I think we have the Lego pieces now, and there's so much to be invented that use your creativity to use it in any part of the business, really.
Absolutely, the possibilities are endless. I think we have to be creative. How do we go about solving for them? And I also want to address the elephant in the room. Like, opportunities are great, possibilities are endless. What about the challenges? I know you touched a little bit on having data. Maybe Madhukar, let me start with you. What do you think are the challenges, when it comes to GenAI adoption for an enterprise?
I think the very first challenge right now, it's a buzzword, right? Nobody really understand what does it really bring in terms of value, right? It's too early for many people, and the value itself sometimes is not quantifiable, right? And that's the biggest challenge which banks are really struggling with, right? So, I mean, as most of us know now, banks are also operating like fintechs, right? So anything we have to invest in, we have to prove value, we have to put funding in, we have to get the buy-in from the senior management. So to prove the right value in terms of GenAI, in terms of the investment, is one of the biggest challenge which we really struggle with, because with GenAI the trust factor is still low, right? Because it's a deep learning and it's a large language model. there are hallucinations, there is IP infringement issues, right? And there are multiple risks which we have to deal with, biases, etc. So to get that kind of a confidence, and that's where we really go with a low risk approach and apply the GenAI right now carefully, maybe or search based use cases or classification use cases or conversational use cases which are little less risky. Wherever there is a decision making in the pipeline, then obviously we stay away from that, right? So the challenge is trust, and the challenge is the value proposition in terms of big banks like us, where we have to really prove and quantify what such an application will bring in terms of value year on year. And that's one. Second biggest challenge is obviously data, right? So garbage in, garbage out. So some people start with AI without even having the right data in or right data strategy in, right? And that's what was one of my biggest challenge when I joined HSBC. There was no proper data strategy in place for security services. And that's what very first thing was, what is the right data strategy which can then pave way for such kind of applications to have to be part of the workflow and to be integrated in the data journey itself, right? And in that regard, again, right from the data collection to data transformation to data distribution, right? In which part, what elements of AI can fit in, you will only know when you have the data strategy in place and you have the right foundation of the data with data quality sorted, right? And this is, I would say, a few challenges from bank's perspective, which we are seeing as hurdles to adopt GenAI at this particular stage.
Yeah. Actually, this resonates very well with the customer case study that we have, right? A tier one bank came to us, they wanted to use generative AI. Very specific use case for ESG. There were quantifiable benefits out of the use case. But the first issue is related to what you were saying, trust. How do I trust the generative AI model that I'm going to use? Is it going to learn from my own data? And that's where letsbloom really came in, build the guardrails, showed that compliance observability, and we were really able to evidence those guardrails, and the customer was able to save 39,000 man hours. So there's definitely potential that can be quantified, but I think it's the trust issue that needs to be really resolved. Asif, to you, what do you think are the challenges? What is really stopping the customers from getting onto the GenAI bandwagon?
See, there are numerous challenges that we are seeing, right? Specifically with big enterprises, I think one of the biggest challenge that I see, is, it's too much for people who probably are sitting in boards today and have not necessarily have a very execution-oriented experience to really catch up with this change, right? Because it's too much, right? Because it's difficult for them to kind of see it and believe it, right? So that's the first challenge that I'm seeing, right? In fact, they all want to go and basically kind of do something about it, but they are not able to kind of articulate how to do it. And that's the first challenge that I'm seeing at a people level. The second is basically this is a change that cannot just happen in silos, right? You need to have everybody in the organization, say it be a compliance department, or say it be frontline staffs, or say it be your digital banking team. Everybody needs to experience this technology in a very safe environment, not like you go out and start using Chat GPT or Gemini public environment. That's not good, because you're putting your enterprise data at risk. And in fact, that's such a big problem right now, because in most of the boards conversation where I go into, they are like, how do I stop this? And my point is, people will change, they want to change. If you do not give them a safe enterprise environment for them to be able to kind of experience this technology, they'll find out ways, right? So to me, at a people level, that's the biggest challenge that I'm seeing right now. And I think the second point, which I think Madhu also touched, was specifically around data readiness, right? In fact, in 2024-25, much of the projects that I'm seeing within the enterprise banking world are around data, because now they have realized is that in order for us to create really get value out of GenAI, we can't just rely on public data. We have to make sure that just like the value creation we can get from the public data, our internal house needs to be in order. And a lot of projects are specifically around data, data readiness, making sure that they have real-time data availability, because the faster the availability, the more hyper-personalization that we have been talking about for so long will eventually get delivered. And the last challenge is specifically around the readiness of the larger regulatory environment, right? I feel that the regulators are also coming up the curve. We will see a lot of regulators come up with AI policies, AI standards that will give banking world, especially on the enterprise side or on the fintech side, some kind of a yardstick on with which they can go and start executing these frameworks, right? So these are a few challenges that I see that the industry needs to overcome. But to me, it's all evolutionary. It won't be revolutionary, because if it's revolutionary, of course the technology is revolutionary. We all believe that it has revolutionary impact, just like Mauricio talked about the first time we identified electricity. But it needs to be phased out in an evolutionary way to really start getting benefits out.
What we've heard about the challenges from an enterprise perspective, right? I'm very keen to understand from a startup perspective.
Sure.
What are the challenges that you face? And you do cater to enterprises, right? You are selling to banks. So, what are the challenges that you have to face?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that I'm representing the entrepreneurs here, because I started my company about a year and a half ago, 2 years, and before that I worked for Google serving enterprises. So I was building systems for enterprises as well. So I kind of have a little bit of a view of both worlds. I'm going to speak purely on the entrepreneur side of me, but so for us, obviously where we spend the money was a big challenge, as I was telling you earlier, because regulatory compliance for us and getting certifications is extremely expensive for a startup. It's very, very difficult to do. So from the very early moment when we decided to build this company, we knew that we have to make a decision when we invest the money, and we started, obviously because of necessity, we had to lean towards being more creative around how do we get around the certifications and especially the compliance issues, right? So very creatively find ways to do a lot of things on client side, and we were able to do that. And to this day, so by the way, we have very large enterprises now. Our customers, we have 3 global banks. We have 3 of the 4 big auditors as customers, and yet we don't have a single certification. So you might think, how is that possible, right? And it's possible because we were very creative as to how we frame the technology to be able to say, to go through all the scrutiny. I have sat in very, very long meetings with security teams, in compliance teams, and they, at the end of it, they go like, oh, well, yeah, you're good, you're good to go. So that's one challenge. I think, the other challenge, and might sound a little bit alien to you, is like, we sell efficiency. So the normal way that you will find out if in your portfolio you have a company that is the next Enron is that if you hire a third-party firm that will do deep forensic accounting, because the auditors will not find that, right? So you do deep forensic accounting, you spend millions. One forensic report will cost you about $100,000 to $200,000, right? And then you find out whether or not that company is fraudulent or not, and by then it's already too late because you suspected that something was wrong. Yeah. With ours, you can just run an entire portfolio and then you find a fraud. But the challenge is that when we bring that to the financial institutions where they have somebody who's been doing that for 30 years, the first thing that they say is, I can do this better. Yeah, and the moment, so this is this dissonance between the senior leadership of large enterprise saying, we need to go AI, let's go AI, let's go AI. Then you have the compliance guy saying, we cannot do it, we have to do this and that and that. And then you have the practitioners who go like, oh, why should I do it? Right? And we're in the middle trying to sell them, trying to explain to them that we're not trying to replace you, though we think we might actually do a better job, because we're using the same techniques that you use, just that the machine does it, without making mistakes. But at the same time, we have to convince them that it's going to improve your efficiency, it's going to improve your productivity, right? That's the second challenge. The third one is hiring people for us is hard. Especially since, of course, the AI world is now such a big buzzword, and everything is happening. For us, it's hard to hire the people. And even on the tech side, looking into the compliance side of things, what I explained earlier, the creativity to make it compliant, it's been hard to hire that people even, right? Because they're very well paid everywhere else, and we have little to offer more than an exciting job.
So I think, one common theme that has been from all three of you in the challenges section is really the compliance, right? How do you tackle that compliance? Or how do you navigate the compliance landscape? I know, Asif, you spoke about regulatory considerations. I want to understand from a Google Cloud perspective, right? Like, how are you addressing those challenges? MAS has a certain view on GenAI, right? They've come out with their FATE principles. HKMA has a certain view. So how do you go about tackling those and even educating your customers?
Yeah, that's a very, very, very good question. So see, at Google Cloud, basically what we did is, in 2016, 2017, once the transformer framework was identified, and that's where I think the seeding and the building blocks of the modern Gen AI transformation that we see was kind of envisaged, right? At that point in time, I think AI, although it's an old technology, but had started picking up quite a bit, specifically machine learning. And we had seen, various different APIs that started to get published. There was a lot of, utilization in terms of checking parameters, all those things that had started to come up. That's where Google published its 7 principles, which were primarily the foundation principles around how it would go. And I think after that, we see a lot of organizations, they basically started publishing their own principles on how AI should be socially beneficial, it should be making sure that it's basically helping positive transformation, etc., etc. Right? We have our own set of principles. That's the first thing that we've done. The second thing is also about, as I said, it's evolutionary. I think in some of the panels that I've been in the last couple of days on Insights Forum, a lot of this is about how Gen AI will take away human jobs, right? To me, at this point in time, it's the best way where, it's the best, from an overall perspective, I see it's the best human and machine coming together to create value. And specifically, people who are using AI in some capacity or are consuming Gen AI, their lives have become much more productive. So from an overall compliance perspective, I see another angle which Google Cloud does extremely well is enablement, right? We do a lot of enablement across regulators, policymakers, techpreneurs, as well as basically the enterprise customers, which continues to basically raise the bar of the industry overall. And a lot of this is substantiated by free training, etc., so that people can understand the power of certain technology. So these are some initiatives that are basically happening. And of course, a lot of this is about making sure that, as a Google Cloud technology, it's getting industrially, kind of certified with the top regulators, top ISO standards, certifications, just to make sure that, the technology is superior, it's at par at where it's industry. But honestly, where it's going to be in the next couple of years, what's going to happen, nobody knows, right? We do always, and this is exactly that aha moment where I remember 2001, 2002, everybody was like, okay, no, let branches remain. That transition in the banking world took about 15 to 16 years. If you see, right now, nobody wants to go to branches, nobody goes to branches until and unless it's very, very, it's a requirement. I think the same evolution will happen. Naturally, the bar at which the regulators are working has improved a lot. You know, the alternate models like virtual banks, digital banks that came in have created a foundation. In fact, all the traditional banks or big tier banks are now trying to replicate some of the digital technology that these fintechs or digital banks used to offer. I think the same transformation will happen. It may not take 15 years. It may be probably half the time, but we'll see how things.
Faster evolution, maybe.
Faster and calculated and measured revolution. That's how we'll say. With sanity.
And Madhukar, coming to you, when it comes to really tackling compliance, you spoke about, data privacy, IP infringement, like those are very valid concerns, and, compliance would come after those. So how do you tackle those in your organization?
So compliance is a bit, I would say, nascent at this stage in terms of GenAI, because GenAI itself has taken a huge leap, and then compliance is reactive in nature. If it comes to, you give example of HK mass or mass, it's all reactive, right? GenAI came first, and then people started thinking what compliance measures we need to put in, and that's where big organizations are taking it very subjectively, right? And for example, HSBC have their own AI compliance forums, which is highly regulated. I mean, if I have to launch an LLM model externally today, I have a 6 months of compliance regulatory approvals to prove within the bank in order to go live, right? I'll give you a very simple example. I mean, I envisaged a smart assistant LLM based bot for a security services client. And just for that, when I went to my AI governance committee within HSBC, they gave me a whole roadmap which was like almost 3 to 6 months. So which I had to go through, fill like 18 different documents, and then go through the different stages of proving the biases, guardrails, etc., etc. And I mean, if I do that, my stakeholders will just get discouraged. So one, I had to find innovative way to show that okay, I had to split my entire model into small chunks. That okay, I start with natural language processing and understanding, first capturing everything in natural language, but I will not respond anything contextually, right? So that's my MVP, and that doesn't need compliance, right? So I start there, and then I had to put phases in that okay, it matches with that 6 months of period, that okay, by the time I reach my target state, I'm there. But again, to point of compliance, I don't think anybody understand what measures needs to be put in place, either bank or even regulators. When we go to regulators, right, they don't even have correct definition if we ask questions. So it's a Q&A right now. When they put any compliance rule to us, then we ask question, then they put more definition in, and then we had to put some more guardrails, and we have to put some more reporting around it, right? So it's to Asif's point, right? It's an evolutionary stage at this moment, both Gen AI as well as compliance, but compliance is more reactive rather than proactive at this stage.
I just want to add a point, Neha. So see, this is why I have realized that banks that are able to undergo, a overall evolutionary change across all the staff are able to get more value out of it, right? So, say it be compliance, say it be any team, right? When they are able to themselves see the technology in action. In fact, one of the banks that I've been working, what they have done is that they have launched an internal tool which every one of the staff can access, and it's initially a basic tool. basically just to make sure that it's providing some GenAI capabilities within the environment so that the staff can start and make the feel. And that's why they have a back office report connected to it. And that office report is basically looking at all the prompts that are coming in. And that's where the C-level executive, they sit in a room every month and they basically look at, understanding what are the data, what are the prompts that are coming in, and they take decisions based on that. Okay, this is something that can be enabled very quickly, then they work with the team to get that out. And that's where there is this, that there's evolution that is happening in the understanding of what's the art of possible, what productivity does it bring to them, and naturally there is also evolution on the compliance side, saying that okay, we started internally, we have seen the value of it is, now let's make sure we can slowly start bringing that value to the customer. That's on the enterprise bank side, but I'm not seeing this at all on the fintech side. In fact, if you look at some of these big digital native companies, they have already gone ahead and implemented, some intelligent voice-enabled chatbots, which are launched in very localized languages as well. And I think a lot of this is basically the technology is there. I think it all depends on the readiness of and the maturity of the organization and the risk, right? If it's a risk that you can take, if you have the right technology levers to kind of substantiate to the regulators, they will always be supportive. I've never come across a regulator that will say that go and do this. They'll be like, it's your risk, you can manage it, please do it.
Very well said. You're actually right that it really depends upon the maturity of the organization and the risk appetite, right? Like how much are they willing to take? And a lot of times this also is a blocker in enterprises, right? Like their compliance teams would be coming in at the front. Like you spoke about 6 months just to get the POC started. And we've seen that with our customers. We've seen where a POC would just not kick off because compliance would be sitting there saying, no, you can't even touch it unless you prove the guardrails to me, you evidence those to us. And that's the only way you can move to next stage. And we've seen it for startups also. Like we've had startups who were selling to say, large banks, and banks are like, I want to look at your compliance posture. And there you can't just say, okay, I'm SOC 2 attestated or I'm ISO 27001 certified. They're like, sure, these are just one time. How do you prove your continuous compliance to me? And that's where letsbloom really came in with the continuous monitoring feature around compliance and said, we can show you that the customer, or the software is compliant. So I guess it is really dependent upon the organization. In the interest of time, I'm going to just open it up for questions. Does anyone have any question? Rob, the special one, yes.
I suppose a question for you, Madhu, in terms of Maro's position as an entrepreneur and as a startup founder, is with the adoption of GenAI, the number of use cases that I'm sure you're coming across daily, if not hourly, is there a temptation for big enterprises, with big regulated enterprises, to look at internal innovation versus external? So it's easier to get through the compliance process rather than onboard a startup, regardless of the size of the startup, or the funding behind the startup, or the solution the startup is bringing. Is there a bit of a dichotomy that do we invest externally or do we invest internally?
That's the decision on a daily basis. Every single use case, every single innovation we have to do. We have to think about, do we escalate, find a partner, do it faster, or do we just do internally rather than going through all the compliance, regulatory steps to make sure we can onboard the vendor and then we get some surprises, or we see a black box in future, right? So that's one decision which is ongoing. And if you talk about again specifically around HSBC, AI is something which is very internal at this stage. We have a center of excellence for AI in China, very huge team. So I would say 80% of our AI application are all in-house built. Unless we have already adopted a product, for example, GCP, right, or Databricks or any other product, right, which already comes with any AI element, then they are easy to adopt. But at this stage, looking internal first is the policy for many banks, for the very reason that specifically they want the complete control on what they're building in terms of this unknown space, and specifically for the trust factor. Although it is slow in nature, but Nia talked about Let's Bloom, so that's one open area specifically in banks to bring in partners who can help us fast pace the regulatory and compliance nature, so we can internally release the use cases faster than externally, at least to start with. But on a buy versus build, this changes every 6 months depending on, if let's say my new client comes in, is a huge multi-million-dollar client, and I have to deliver something faster, then everybody's open to onboard an external vendor into external fintech to go faster to the market. And then if it's something which we are creating to internally to find operational efficiency, there is no immediate revenue benefit which we can show, and there is no client pressure, then that take longer time, and mostly that is done internally.
Yeah, so if I say, we are faced with a lot of requests to go beyond what we sell many times, because many of our customers, and I'm talking about like exchanges, even regulators. We have customers, a regulator from the UK and Singapore, in banks, that they feel that it's very hard for them to put together a team for a particular project and get it done as quickly as we can do it. Obviously, we have no restrictions. Our bureaucracy is really low, right? So we get it done. We can get it done very quickly, and it's being hard for us to also say no, because sometimes we feel like we want to sell our own product, but these are very large customers that are asking us for it. So obviously, the internal pressure that comes from the stakeholders in terms of like use AI inside the enterprise has been big, but there's still there's this dissonance between the compliance teams and all the bureaucracy that takes to get to something done, right? And we see that quite often. Some really not the really complicated projects that we've been asked to see if we could do it for them.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, that's the sign that we have to wrap up. So just to conclude, looks like generative AI has immense possibilities. We have to be creative about it, and navigating the compliance landscape is a crucial aspect. We'll figure it out how, but that's all. Thank you so much for an insightful panel discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.